Right before getting a divorce, I got the power of telepathy. My supposedly ice-cold husband was whimpering in his heart. What do I do? My wife doesn't want me anymore. And my mother-in-law, who was always picking on me, her inner monologue was, I tease her every day just because I want us to be the ultimate bestie mother and daughter-in-law duo. Boo-hoo, did I take the joke too far? Then there's my fiercely tight-lipped father-in-law. My daughter-in-law wants a divorce. Do I need to break that little punk's legs? Even their cat. Meow, 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 she's my favorite human ever. Please don't leave. I couldn't stand this married life anymore. Married for 3 months, the number of times my husband, Julian, had been home could be counted on one hand. If that were all, fine. But my mother-in-law played pranks on me every single day. She'd say she got me a present to surprise me, and when I opened the box, it nearly scared me to death right on the spot. Inside was a bloody, severed leg. As I stood there completely shell-shocked, my mother-in-law patted my shoulder to comfort me. It's fake, it's just a cake. Let's slice it up and eat it. When I accompanied her to a hot spring, she flipped the breaker and dressed up as a ghost by the water. Seriously, if I had even a mild heart condition, I would have flatlined right there. Time and time again, I really couldn't take it anymore. The day Julian came back, I personally went to the airport to pick him up. The main reason was to talk to him about getting a divorce. If I kept getting pranked by his mother like this, my ultimate fate would either be kicking the bucket or checking into a psych ward. The day I set out, my mother-in-law grabbed my hand. Oh my, it's windy at the airport. Let me get you that shawl. Seeing how sincere she looked, I didn't overthink it, took the shawl, and hurried to drive to the airport. But I never expected that a leopard truly can't change its spots. When I unfolded the shawl, a massive black spider flew out of it. Julian happened to be walking toward me right then. I instinctively shrieked and clung to him like a koala. Julian was 6'2", with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. He worked out year-round, so he was solid as a rock, but my sense of security went through the roof. I was still trying to catch my breath when I heard a deep voice. Are you done hugging me? His mood was always completely unpredictable. I was just about to let go when another incredibly sweet, whiny voice echoed in my ear. Oh, my wife is actually cuddling me on her own. Am I dreaming? My wife smells so good. I froze, then looked around and asked Julian, did you hear that voice? His expression was icy. What voice? That sweet, whiny voice spoke up again. Oh, my wife looks so cute looking around like that. But what is she looking at? Is she checking out other guys? I was absolutely certain. This was Julian's voice, just with an added filter of cuteness. But he hadn't opened his mouth at all. I scratched my head. What was going on? A random bystander walked past us. Tusk, do they think they're in a rom-com? Hugging in the middle of the airport, how dramatic. I grabbed the bystander. Were you just insulting me? The guy looked utterly confused. Miss, I'm just passing by, I didn't say a single word. He practically fled the scene. I quietly thought it over and came to a bold conclusion. Is it possible that I've developed telepathy? To prove this theory, I plan to test it a few more times. Naturally, my guinea pig would be Julian. After getting into the car, I purposely sat in the passenger seat and intentionally brushed my hand against his lightly. Then I acted like a total innocent pick-me girl. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. He just gave a light and didn't say anything else. But I heard his inner thoughts. My wife actually touched my hand again, I'm so happy. But why are her hands so cold? When we get back, I really need to tell Martha to make some nutritious soup to warm my wife up. I looked at him in astonishment. Julian actually cared about me this much. Judging by his series of inner thoughts just now, he was definitely a total simp. And the person he was simping for was me. But I remembered he had an unforgettable first love. When we got married, his cousin purposely provoked me. Even if you get my brother's body, you'll never have his heart. I wanted to say, silly child, what do I need your brother's heart for? What I want is his massive wallet. Hey youngster, why the sudden urge to pick me up today? Julian rarely initiated a conversation. As soon as he finished speaking, his inner voice chimed in again. Did my wife finally realize how great I am? Has she decided to stick with me through thick and thin, love me madly, and treat me with the utmost respect? Wait, respect isn't the right word for lovers. My mouth twitched. I cleared my throat. I want a divorce. The moment the words left my mouth, I gripped my seatbelt tightly, just in case he slammed on the brakes and my head went flying into the windshield. But he drove steadily. Only his thoughts were panicking. Boo-hoo, why is my wife suddenly asking for a divorce? Does she hate me? She doesn't want me anymore. What do I do? Yet on the surface, he coldly asked, why? I parted my lips. I couldn't exactly say it was because his mom pranked me every day, right? So I found a reasonable excuse. I just feel like our values don't align. Julian scoffed. Lily, why didn't you think our values didn't align when we got married? Right after he said that, his inner voice followed. Boo-hoo, I shouldn't be so aggressive. Can I slap my own stupid mouth? That won't be necessary. We didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. But his inner voice was so loud it gave me a headache. One second it was sniffle sniffle, the next it was boo-hoo, and then oh. A flock of 1,500 ducks wasn't as loud as him alone. As soon as we got home, my mother-in-law happily greeted us. Oh my, you're back, I made dinner. Hurry, go wash your hands and come eat. I quietly looked at my mother-in-law, because I could hear her inner voice too, because she said, and the inner voice I heard from her was like this. If they eat this meal tonight, 10 months from now, I'll have a grandchild to prank. I glanced at the dishes and understood. The food was spiked. I looked at my mother-in-law's smug expression and said, "We already ate outside. Thanks, Mom." My mother-in-law's face instantly dropped. After speaking, I nudged Julian with my elbow, hoping he'd play along. Instead, Julian ignored me and walked straight to the table. "If she isn't eating, I will." I heard his inner voice. "Between back-to-back meetings, work, and the flight, I haven't eaten in almost 20 hours. I'm starving to death. I'm so hungry today I could eat an entire cow." I coughed lightly. Julian looked up at me. His inner voice whimpered, "Will my wife be mad at me? But I'm seriously so hungry. If my blood sugar drops and I faint in front of her later, wouldn't that be even more embarrassing?" My mouth twitched. "Bro, your inner voice is already embarrassing enough, okay?" But it was kind of cute. Outwardly, Julian was cold and noble, like a walking giant refrigerator that made mere mortals keep their distance. I never expected him to be so cute and pure on the inside. My thoughts of divorce wavered slightly. At that moment, my mother-in-law's inner voice rang out again. "Why isn't she eating?" "What do I do? Only my son is eating it. How do I fix this situation?" My mother-in-law was like a cat on a hot tin roof. "Right, laxatives will work. Make him throw up or poop it out." After thinking that, she excitedly ran into the kitchen. I watched her happily bouncing, retreating figure and shot Julian a sympathetic look. With such an unhinged mom, the fact that he managed to grow up this big and healthy was no easy feat. Because I kept staring at Julian, his inner voice started rambling again. "Why does my wife keep looking at me? Is there something on my face?" He touched his face. "Nope. Could it be that my wife is mesmerized by how I look when I eat? I remember performing eating a whole pig in 3 bites when I was a kid. Better skip that for now so I don't scare my wife." Dark lines formed on my forehead. "All right, stop talking. If you say any more, you'll lose your very last shred of dignity." Not long after, my mother-in-law came out carrying a bowl of an absolute abomination of a dish. "Good boy, drink this after you finish your meal." Julian frowned. "What is this?" "A medicinal soup that's good for your body." Oh, his own mother. Seeing Julian clueless and about to drink that bowl of soup, my brain short-circuited. I reached out and directly knocked it over. The soup spilled all over Julian. I stayed frozen in the posture of knocking the bowl away and awkwardly smiled at them. If I said I was swatting a fly, would you believe me? Obviously, they didn't. Julian went back to his room to change clothes with a dark expression. Yet his inner voice was howling in misery. "Boo-hoo, my wife really is mad that I ate by myself." As soon as he left, my mother-in-law started urging me. "Your husband just got burned, aren't you going to go help him?" At that moment, her inner voice chimed in again. "Looks like even God wants me to hold a granddaughter, oh ho ho ho. Daughter-in-law, I can only say sorry to you." I inwardly scoffed. "If your son dares to disrespect me, I will absolutely beat him into next week." But the moment I stepped into the room, a pair of hands wrapped around me from behind. The usually aloof and cold Julian was now acting like a giant, clingy puppy. He wrapped his long arms around me, buried his head in my chest, and whined, "Wifey, cuddle me." This wasn't his inner voice. It was his actual spoken truth. A mischievous thought suddenly popped into my head. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened the camera to record. "What did you just call me?" "Wifey." The giant puppy looked at me with big, innocent eyes. "I'm so cute. I kind of wanted to give him a good rub. I purposely said, 'Who is your wifey?'" Julian let me go and twiddled his fingers, looking like a poor little victim. "Does my wife not like me anymore? If my wife doesn't like me, then nobody will want me." He hugged my arm. "Wifey, don't leave me." Eventually, I coaxed this giant, whiny bear to sleep. Then I looked toward the door. When I opened the bedroom door, my mother-in-law had actually moved quite fast, but was still one step too slow. "Mom, what are you doing out here?" I asked her intentionally. "I was just checking if you two were asleep." My mother-in-law was beyond embarrassed, but inwardly she was wailing, caught red-handed by my daughter-in-law. What do I do? What do I do? I really didn't want to peep, but saying it is easy, my body is too honest. But I didn't hear a single thing. It's all because when we renovated, we picked the most soundproof doors. I wonder if that little punk succeeded. He definitely didn't, right? It's barely been any time, sigh. Could it be that my son is impotent? It was getting more and more ridiculous. I interrupted her inner monologue right on cue. "Mom, I have something to tell you." Ever since I discovered I could hear the entire family's inner thoughts, I felt I needed to do something. Like I needed to seize the initiative. I deliberately put on a conflicted expression. "Mom, I want to divorce Julian. Our values don't align, we have nothing in common to talk about. We aren't suited to be husband and wife anymore." On the surface, my mother-in-law looked at me calmly. But on the inside, she was already having a meltdown. What? She wants to divorce my son? How can she do that? Doesn't that mean my son will be single forever? If they divorce, won't I lose my daughter-in-law? Boo-hoo, when I go to my lady friend meetups, they will definitely mock me. My mouth twitched. So you're quite vain and competitive, aren't you? Could it be that my past pranks scared her? But I don't hate her at all. I just wanted to build a bond with her to be the ultimate bestie mother and daughter-in-law duo. I looked at my mother-in-law in surprise. So she didn't hate me. She only did all that to get my attention. I suddenly found her a little cute. I remembered the day Julian and I got married. My mother-in-law secretly pulled me aside and stuffed a huge red envelope into my hands. I happily opened it, only to find a blank IOU note inside. On it was written, "Daughter-in-law, spend as much pocket money as you want, Mom can afford it." At the time, I thought she was deliberately messing with me. But looking at it now, she was genuinely good to me, just with a slightly flawed execution. You're getting a divorce? A deep, booming voice echoed. Oh no, my father-in-law is here. My father-in-law, Richard, was a very stern man. His education of Julian was quite ruthless. I heard that after Julian turned 18, my father-in-law cut off all his financial support, making him work study abroad by himself and be entirely self-sufficient. Later, when he joined the company, his father also made him start from the very bottom. He never got special treatment just because he was the chairman's son. Poor Julian often worked overtime until dawn, and over tiny little mistakes, he would get chewed out relentlessly by his dad. Because of this iron fist upbringing, Julian was a man of few words, with a cold and heavy personality, seeming thoroughly unapproachable, just like a walking giant refrigerator. But ever since I inexplicably awakened this telepathy skill, I realized that beneath Julian's icy exterior was actually a very soft heart. Julian and I had a business marriage. There were no dramatic or bizarre reasons behind it. It was simply that we were both unmarried and at the right age. I figured he didn't have any bad habits, so I might as well marry him. Getting married early would also stop my family from pressuring me to wed, letting me live my best, carefree life. And as a matter of fact, the biggest change after marrying Julian was that besides having an extra person on my bed, absolutely nothing changed. I am a heavy sleeper. By the time I woke up, Julian would already be gone. And because he worked overtime constantly, he would only come home under the starlight long after I had fallen asleep. Even though we lived under the same roof, the number of times we spoke could be counted on one hand. Despite this, I had never actually thought of divorcing him. Why get a divorce? My father-in-law narrowed his eyes, staring at me sternly. I swallowed hard. Dad, actually, Before I could even explain, my father-in-law's inner voice followed. That little punk must have bullied Lily. Watch me break that punk's dog legs. Could that brat be fooling around with women outside? No way, right? Even though that boy has a charming face, his personality takes after me. He's very devoted. But who knows, the outside world is full of temptations. If this brat lost his mind for a moment and got seduced by some outside homewrecker, it's entirely possible. If he dares to wrong my war buddy's daughter, I'll absolutely beat him into next week. Actually, if I beat him into next week, I'll have to take care of him. I'll just beat him to death. I looked at my father-in-law. Are you really that brutal? I couldn't help but feel sympathy for Julian. How was this spare the rod, spoil the child? This was literally treating him like an enemy. My father-in-law wrapped up his mental gymnastics and said to me, Daughter-in-law, don't you worry. If Julian ever does you wrong, I will intervene. I was breaking out in a cold sweat. How exactly are you going to intervene? My mother-in-law panicked. What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't tell me you're making our son copy the Diamond Sutra in the middle of the night again. My father-in-law's mouth twitched. That was before he turned 10. He curled his lips into a cold sneer. After he turned 10, it became beat him or he won't succeed. At this exact moment, Julian, who was fast asleep in bed, had absolutely no idea danger was approaching or that his legs were about to be broken. But he hadn't even done anything wrong. I stopped my eager-to-fight father-in-law. Dad, he's already asleep. Can whatever this is wait until tomorrow, please? I looked at him pitifully. My mother-in-law chimed in from the side. Right. The young couple hasn't even said anything. What are you getting so worked up for? My mother-in-law dragged my father-in-law downstairs. I breathed a sigh of relief. Comrade Julian, I just saved your life. Just as I was about to go back to my room, the family's ragdoll cat walked past my eyes. Unfortunately, I could even hear the cat's inner voice. Meow, meow, meow. This is my favorite human lady ever. Please don't leave. I looked at it in astonishment. Casper opened his bright blue eyes and meowed affectionately at me twice. I was completely overwhelmed by his cuteness, bent down, and picked him up. But the very next second, his inner voice came through. Could it be that the male human's first love came back and the female human found out? I narrowed my eyes dangerously. Very well, Julian. You have passed romantic history and didn't confess it to me. Even though I am a chill person, I absolutely cannot tolerate any disrespect. I carefully recalled what happened before Julian and I got married. At that time, we had only met a few times. I asked him, why did you agree to marry me? He looked like he couldn't care less. I have to get married anyway. What difference does it make who it is? At first, I thought he was just like me, having no fantasies or expectations about love or marriage. I just wanted to slack off and enjoy life, while he just wanted to focus on his career. Why bother dating? It will only slow down how fast I eat, and slow down his speed of drawing his sword to conquer the business world. But now, I definitely didn't think so. So he was just settling for less. Since he couldn't get the pure first love of his dreams, he just married me instead. I sneered and put Casper down. I opened the door and walked into the room. Shortly after, a blood-curdling scream rang out from the bedroom. The next day, the four of us sat together eating breakfast. I calmly sipped my porridge. Beside me, my mother-in-law's eyes didn't stop moving for a second, constantly darting back and forth between me and Julian. Of course, her inner voice was constantly rambling too. Why did my son's eye turn into a panda eye? Did my daughter-in-law hit him? Probably not. Last night when my honey wanted to hit our son, she even stopped him. Hee, then it must just be some playful couple's bedroom roleplay. I expressionlessly took a bite of my fried egg. Right after my mother-in-law piped down, my father-in-law's inner voice started up. That black eye was struck perfectly. It'd be great if they could give him a matching pair. My OCD can't stand asymmetrical things. Speaking of which, my daughter-in-law is usually so laid back, but she's pretty sharp when it comes to throwing hands. She's got her dad's style. This little punk definitely wronged her. Wait until we get to the office, watch me beat him to death. Beat him, beat him. This time I've made up my mind. Out of sight, out of mind. Julian put his bowl and chopsticks down. Even though he was sporting a black eye, it didn't hinder his icy CEO or a one bit. I'm full, I'm leaving first. Seeing that he was about to leave, my mother-in-law quickly urged me, Lily, go see him out. I rolled my eyes internally. What's there to see out? Did he not grow legs, or does he not know the way? Seeing my hesitation, Julian glanced at me. Then he turned and left. He walked away so decisively, but his inner voice told a different story. Boo-hoo, why isn't my wife coming after me? Does she really not care about me anymore? What did I do wrong for her to treat me like this? As soon as I woke up this morning, my eye hurt. Why do I have a black eye? Could my wife have hit me? Boo-hoo, why would she hit me? Could I have done something to her? Wait, no. Yesterday my mom gave me some unknown drink and I felt completely drunk. Could it be that when I was out of my mind, I did something to my wife? Oh no, what do I do? Will my wife think I'm a massive perv? But I don't remember anything from yesterday. This stupid pig brain. If only memories had a replay function. So loud. On one hand, you act like you like me so much and care about me, but what is the deal with your unforgettable first love? Why are you pretending to be so deeply affectionate and pitiful here? Wait, I called out to him. Julian turned his head. I don't know if it was my imagination, but I thought I saw a flash of joy and surprise in his eyes, though it was quickly masked by coldness. What do you want? I smiled and walked up to him. Let me go to the office with you today. There's no evidence of his crimes at home, but there might be at the office. I really wanted to see who this first love of his was. Knowing I was going to the office with him, Julian panicked. For the whole ride, I got a headache from his noisy inner voice. Why does my wife suddenly want to go to the office with me? I've been so busy these past few days, I haven't cleaned my office properly. Will she be disgusted by me and think I'm unhygienic? Oh right, when we get to the office later, how should I introduce her so it sounds badass? Should I just domineeringly pull her clothes and say to everyone, this is your boss lady? Too cheesy. Better keep it low-key. And say, this is my madam. Yes, madam sounds so classy and nice. My mouth twitched. What is all this nonsense? Julian, could your thoughts get any more derailed? When we arrived at the company, Julian gentlemanly let me enter the elevator first. Yay, I finally get to ride my private elevator with my wife. So happy. Later, when I'm working, my posture needs to look handsome. I think someone said my side profile is more handsome. I'll show her my side profile and charm her to death. Someone said, who said? In my mind, I had already assumed he was two-timing me, so I looked at him with great displeasure right now. My wife is looking at me. When we got to Julian's office, I thought it would look like a pigsty, but it turned out perfectly spotless, looking exactly like a model showroom. And he calls this messy. Sure enough, just like his dad, both were hopeless neat freaks. Sit wherever you want. I need to work. If you don't have anything important, don't bother me, understood? His 98-degree mouth spat out minus 50-degree words. But his inner voice was saying, wife, I'm sorry, I can't keep you company, work is too busy. Boo-hoo, if I don't finish, I'll have to work overtime again. This damn stupid job. When can I stop going to work? I still want to hold my wife's hand and go on vacation. I couldn't help but interrupt his inner thoughts. By the way, your assistant is a guy. Julian was terrified I wouldn't believe him, so he specifically pressed the intercom to call him in. To make my wife feel at ease, I've always only hired male assistants. I'm totally awesome. Awesome, my foot. Julian's assistant quickly came in. He first brought me a cup of coffee. I looked at him in surprise. How did he know I like to drink this kind? This must be the madam. She has such a great aura. She's so pretty. Is the madam's gaze complimenting me? Thank goodness boss Julian made me prepare all of madam's preferences in advance. Now they finally come in handy. I looked at Julian in astonishment. He made his assistant memorize my preferences. What exactly was he trying to do? Absolutely, I definitely won't be moved by these petty little favors. Julian's assistant was always by his side, so he definitely knew about some of his secret schemes. Then as long as I followed him, I would hear his inner thoughts. What's your name? I asked the assistant. He was extremely polite and humble. Madam, my name is Simon. To the side, Julian looked at us warily. Why is my wife being so gentle to Assistant Simon? Why did my wife ask for his name? A man's damn possessiveness. I ignored Julian's spamming comments in my ears, directly put down my coffee. Assistant Simon, this is my first time at the company and I'm quite curious. Can you take me on a tour? Assistant Simon looked pleadingly at Julian. Julian's inner voice snapped. Why are you looking at me? Looking at me won't sprout flowers on my face. This Assistant Simon. Should I send him away to another country next time? I coughed lightly. Julian kept a straight face and said, go ahead, take the madam on a tour of the company. This was a rare and precious opportunity. I had to fish out who Julian's first love was from him. Assistant Simon took me around, explaining things as we went. I pretended not to care and asked him, when did you start working for Julian? Assistant Simon was very honest. The old master assigned me to boss Julian. So he was assigned by my father-in-law. Then he probably wouldn't be in cahoots with Julian. You and Julian go on business trips together often. Is there anything weird about him when he travels? Weird about him? Assistant Simon frowned slightly. Madam, what exactly are you referring to? Let me give you an example. Like, does he go to specific places, buy specific things, or meet specific people? Assistant Simon didn't speak, but I heard his inner thoughts. Oh crap, does the madam know something? Every time boss Julian and I go on a business trip to France, he always goes to a very old pottery shop. But as an assistant, I don't dare ask too much. The boss couldn't possibly be hiding a secret mistress all the way overseas, could he? And besides, the boss is truly so good to the madam. I remember last time, he was supposed to attend a very important meeting, but in the end, he declined it. The reason was actually to go home and celebrate his wife's birthday. Birthday, I remembered. That was right after Julian and I got married. It was my first birthday. I knew Julian definitely wouldn't remember his wife's birthday, and I didn't expect him to celebrate it for me, so I planned to invite my girlfriends out to eat and drink heavily. But just as I finished getting dressed up, the door to my room was opened. Julian appeared in front of me, panting heavily. I was a little surprised. Why are you back so early today? Did the sun rise in the west? It was only 3 p.m. Normally, he wouldn't be back until late at night. He steadied his breathing and looked at me with deep eyes. His thin lips parted slightly. What are you getting ready to do? Of course. I wouldn't say that today was my birthday, so I casually made up an excuse. Oh, I'm meeting up with my girlfriends. His Adam's apple bobbed. Seeing him look like he wanted to say something but held back, I asked, confused. Do you need something? His eyes flashed slightly. Finally, he sighed helplessly. Nothing, go have fun, enjoy yourself. I didn't need you to tell me that. I grabbed my bag and went out. Halfway there, I kept feeling like eyes were watching me from behind. But when I turned around, there was nothing. It must have been an illusion, right? So the workaholic Julian, in order to celebrate my birthday, straight up pushed aside his work engagements to come be with me. Then what was the deal with his first love? Forget it. I'm the kind of person who can't keep things bottled up. I'll just ask directly. Beating around the bush is too tiring. Assistant Simon, do you know anything about boss Julian's past romantic history? Assistant Simon had a face full of question marks. Terrified he didn't understand, I continued to prompt him. Like a childhood sweetheart or something. Before Assistant Simon could speak, a deep, displeased voice sounded from behind. Lily, wouldn't it be faster to ask me that yourself? Oh crap. Assistant Simon ran away faster than anyone. My scalp went numb. Julian walked step by step until he stood in front of me, his eyes like knives. So you followed me to the company because you wanted to investigate my romantic history. I laughed awkwardly. He rolled his eyes at me. Lily, since I married you, I would never betray you. I nodded repeatedly. He continued his lecture. Your actions today insulted me. His inner voice sounded off. Boo-hoo, my wife actually doesn't trust me, but her caring about all this means she has me in her heart. Wow, you really know how to comfort yourself. Not bad, not bad. Then how are you going to compensate me? Julian looked at me expressionlessly. But in reality, his inner voice was constantly yapping away. Can I demand that my wife not divorce me? Right, we haven't even had our honeymoon yet. My wife said before that she wanted to go to New Zealand for fun. I can start arranging that. I looked at him acting like this and couldn't help but find it funny. He's clearly as cute as a child on the inside, but on the outside, he acts as serious as an old man. This adorable contrast. I made a fist and coughed lightly. Then how do you want me to compensate you? Put on a show of thinking about it for a while, then said with a totally serious face. In a few days, I have to go on a business trip to New Zealand. My assistant happens to be taking time off, so you just come with me. I purposely leaned in close. Hey, when did you expand the company's business to New Zealand? The moment I leaned in, his heartbeat started accelerating and his ears started turning red. His inner voice couldn't stop chiming in either. My wife, she's so close to me again. Boo-hoo, I'm about to lose control of myself. I hurriedly retreated a safe distance. That evening, Julian told my father-in-law and mother-in-law about our upcoming business trip. My mother-in-law was extremely excited. Her inner thoughts were practically smacking me in the face. A business trip is great. When a husband and wife travel together, by the time they come back, she'll probably have a baby in her belly. I've heard that Bobbies made on a honeymoon come out smart and cute. This son of mine has finally figured it out. Meanwhile, my father-in-law was still severely reading his newspaper on the side. But I didn't miss his internal monologue either. This young couple has finally made up. I was going to beat the crap out of this little punk, but it looks like this vicious beating can be put on hold for now. I shot Julian a sympathetic look. This was the first time Julian and I went on a trip together, so I had insomnia. As a result, when I rolled over, I saw Julian staring intently right at me. I jumped in fright. "WH, what are you doing?" he said mildly. "You keep tossing and turning and it's making too much noise for me to sleep." But his inner voice rang out. "Boo-hoo, I really want to snuggle with my wife, but I'm scared she'll beat me up." Snuggling is absolutely impossible. I only found it hilarious. I turned my body to face him. "Julian, what is the deal with your first love?" I thought he would refuse to answer this question. Instead, he looked at me with his dark eyes. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes, I do have a first love in my heart." My heart sank. Well, screw you, Julian. You really were cheating on me behind my back. I was just about to smack him, but his next sentence made me stop in my tracks. Lily, have you really forgotten me? Huh? When did I ever remember you? Julian pursed his lips. His expression looked a tiny bit wronged, and his inner voice started yapping away too. My wife really forgot me, boo-hoo. Was my presence really that weak in the past? Julian sighed. A long time ago, we went to the same school. Lily's perspective. My mom always said I was naturally a naive little dear. If people insulted me, it would take me looping around several times before I finally realized it. But also because I was completely carefree, I had pretty good popularity from childhood to adulthood. When I was in high school, I encountered a boy. He was tall and skinny. When other people wore the school uniform, it looked bulky and ill-fitting, but he managed to wear the uniform like a fashion model. The only thing was, he wore a mask year-round. During the school's flag-raising ceremony, I saw him. He was wearing a mask. When I passed by his classroom after class, I saw him, still wearing a mask. Even when I bumped into him in the library, he was still wearing a mask. Even though I couldn't clearly see his face, I still felt he was a beautiful boy. Yes, especially wearing that mask, revealing those Bambi-like eyes and those long, thick eyelashes, he looked just like a doll. I gossiped with my desk mate. That boy wearing the mask in the next class, do you know who he is? My desk mate shook her head. No idea, he just transferred here recently. I thought so too. He was always coming and going alone and wore a mask, giving him zero presents. Who would remember him anyway? Very soon our paths crossed. The cause was that when in the library, I accidentally took his book. When he chased after me, he was still wearing his mask but was panting heavily. I was terrified he might suffocate and asked him, "Why don't you take off your mask?" He shook his head. I paused for a second. Could he also be mute? I happened to have learned sign language, so I gestured to him. "Why do you always wear a mask?" He frowned, looking as though he didn't understand. I thought about it, then pulled out a notebook and wrote down a line. "Why do you always wear a mask? What is your name?" After he read it, his eyes narrowed slightly. Then he also pulled out a notebook, quickly scribbled down a line, pointed at the book in my hand, grabbed it back without hesitation, and then placed his slip of paper into my hand. I opened it and took a look and got so mad my nostrils flared. Ultimately, before I could dig up his secret, he disappeared again. The next time we met was at a banquet. The so-called business marriage. Lily, your memory really is terrible. As soon as he finished speaking, his inner voice followed. Boo-hoo, I really had absolutely no presence back then. I've dropped so many hints and my wife still didn't remember me. While I wore a completely dumbfounded expression, he said word by word. The first love in my heart is you, Lily. Teenage boy and girl, bright spring sunlight. It just took one brilliant smile, one meeting of the eyes, and it could never be forgotten again. Then came the banquet. Wearing a long dress, elegant and gentle, just like a camellia flower in the mountains. Lily, I don't want to hide it from you. A long, long time ago, I already liked you. He walked closer to me. His gaze was burning brightly. So from now on, are you willing to start over with me? I will spend my entire life making you happy. I pondered it for 3 seconds. Fine by me. After Julian and I came back from our business trip, the whole vibe changed completely. The very strange thing was, I seemingly couldn't hear their inner thoughts anymore. I couldn't even hear Julian's anymore. But so what? Because he has now turned into a total wife-spoiling maniac. The end.